Before you define parsing rules, dashboards, alerts, and much more for your Kubernetes services, as well as your Kubernetes infrastructure, it's important to recognize extensions. Extensions are an amazing feature in Coralogix that can be reached via data flow and extensions, and they're essentially prepackaged alarms and dashboards and much more to minimize your time to value. So you can ingest the data, deploy an extension, and immediately you'll see that data rendered in a meaningful and insightful way. So from the Kubernetes perspective, it's really straightforward. You can search in the text box, you can look for filters down here. So there's a Kubernetes filter right here. If I hit this, you'll see a breakdown of some of the Kubernetes specific features. You can see different extensions for different deployments. If you're using EKS or GKE or AKS, there are different extensions for that. So that's something to be aware of. You can also see different extensions for actual Kubernetes services, like capturing events that have happened in the cluster, or tracking or actually parsing logs and metrics and things that have come from specific tools. So for example, if I open up the Kubernetes OpenTelemetry option here, we can see that we have some dashboards already defined here for various different metrics and things. We can see some alarms that are triggered by the data that's available coming from OpenTelemetry, and we can see parsing rules. This gives you an idea of how to actually ingest and parse the data into a meaningful way. So if I open this up here, we can actually see a really complex breakdown. So this would take a very, very long time to build. And this is one of the really nice things with Coralogix is you ingest the data into Coralogix using OpenTelemetry, completely open source integrations. And then you can deploy something like this extension, and immediately your data is already parsed. Any common problems are fixed. Timestamps are normalized. JSON bodies are parsed. It's so much more. It's so much more than just having to do all this yourself. It's much, much easier. It's a really SaaS-based experience here. So it's really important to recognize extensions. These are good for both the observability use case, but also note that many of these have the security tags on them as well. So if I open up this one, for example, we can see a collection of security rated alarms here. So we can see that users exec into pods. We can see different pod creations, new namespaces being created, essentially significant security events that are happening in your cluster. This is really, really important, okay? It's going to make sure that you completely understand everything that's happening, not just from an observability perspective in terms of resilience and performance and ongoing quality of service, but also the security aspect as well. So there's a use case here for both the DevOps kind of professional and the DevSecOps or InfoSec kind of professional as well. So definitely something to dive into. Remember with extensions, there's a whole section of extensions in getting to know Coralogix. So I'd recommend diving into that. Just remember they can be updated. Each individual resource that's created by an extension can also be amended itself as well. So really, really powerful. Strongly recommend having a dive into this and looking for a relevant technology for what you're doing. So for example, if you're deploying EKS, we have an EKS based deployment, and of course these don't clash with each other. So you could deploy all three of these, for example, OpenTelemetry, Kubernetes, and Amazon EKS. They'll all work beautifully together. So just keep in mind for that. And remember with these extensions as well, if you have multiple clusters and multiple different technologies, you can actually deploy these extensions based on specific applications and specific subsystems as well. So you don't have to deploy for everything, and that's a really nice way of having a multi-cluster setup. Something to be aware of there, you can actually just set different applications as well as different versions of these extensions as well if you're using slightly older versions of software in your cluster as well. So that's just something to be aware of. It's essential that you dig into extensions before you go through the work of creating other parsing rules, alarms, and dashboards. This will just mean that you get immediate value with minimal effort.